she said. "You're too safe, too predictable, too focused on stability for someone like me." I accepted her decision without arguing and quietly walked away. Months later, she contacted me after realizing the exciting life she chased came with constant drama, debt, and public embarrassment she never expected. "You're too safe, Maverick." I heard those words and felt something cold move through my chest. Not anger, not even hurt, just this strange, quiet stillness, like the world had paused for a second to let me absorb exactly what was happening. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she'd held it in long enough and finally decided I deserved the truth. Harper stood at the kitchen counter, arms crossed, not even looking at me when she said it. She was studying the countertop like the answer to something important was hiding in the granite. "You're too predictable," she continued, "too focused on stability." Then she looked up. "For someone like me." I remember thinking, someone like me. Not someone like us. Not a relationship like ours. Just her. Someone like her. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood there in the kitchen of the apartment we'd shared for almost 2 years, looked at her, and nodded slowly. Because somewhere underneath the shock, I already knew what came next. And months later, when she called me from a number I didn't recognize, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it, I understood exactly why I'd let her go without a fight. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We were 27. We'd been together for nearly 3 years, living together for almost 2 of them. We met at a rooftop bar in the West Village, the kind of place where everyone looks like they have somewhere better to be, and somehow that made it feel exciting. She was laughing at something her friend said when I noticed her. Loud, bright, completely comfortable taking up space. I liked that about her immediately. I should have paid more attention to what else came with it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first year was everything. We did the things people do when they're convinced they've found something rare, late dinners in neighborhoods neither of us could afford, weekend trips to places we'd bookmarked for years, the kind of conversations that went until 3 in the morning and somehow still felt unfinished. Harper was a creative director at a mid-size agency in Midtown. Sharp, opinionated, the type of person who walked into rooms and immediately rearranged the energy. I worked in financial planning. Yeah, I know. Already you can see where this is going. But back then it didn't feel like a problem. It felt like balance. She brought color, I brought structure. She dragged me out of routines. I gave her something to land on when the week got heavy. At least, that's what I told myself. The first time I noticed something was off, I ignored it. It was a Thursday night, maybe 14 months into the relationship. She'd gotten home late, restless, pacing the apartment like the walls were too close together. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "Nothing. I just feel like I'm not doing enough." I told her she was doing great. She nodded, but her eyes stayed somewhere else. I should have asked a better question. I didn't. By the second year, there was a pattern I kept talking myself out of seeing. Harper would get excited about something, a new project, a new idea, a new person she'd met at a networking event. And for a few weeks, that thing would be the whole world. Then it would fade. The project would lose its shine. The idea would stall. And she'd come home carrying this low-level frustration, like she was perpetually just on the edge of something that kept moving further away. I thought it was ambition, the drive of someone who expected more from life. I admired it, honestly. I made room for it. I planned my weekends around her moods without ever saying that's what I was doing. I suggested trips when she seemed restless. I cleared my Saturdays when she mentioned wanting to go somewhere spontaneous. Looking back, I wasn't being thoughtful. I was being careful. There's a difference. Careful means you already sense something fragile, and you're quietly trying not to be the one who breaks it. Her new friend group started showing up in conversations around month 20. Tanner, Brooks, a few others I never fully kept track of. She'd met them through a freelance side project she'd picked up, something to do with branding for a new bar that was opening in Bushwick. They were loud, social, perpetually between one interesting thing and the next. Tanner threw parties. Brooks was apparently DJ at a pop-up in Dumbo every other weekend. I went to one of those events with her in October. I remember standing near the back with a drink I didn't really want, watching Harper move through the crowd like she'd been waiting for that room her entire life. She looked electric. She looked like someone I recognized, but couldn't quite reach anymore. On the cab ride home, she talked the entire time. About the energy. About how creatively alive she felt. About how Tanner had this whole philosophy about not tying yourself to conventional timelines. I listened. I asked questions. I didn't say what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, Something is shifting, and I don't know which direction it's going. The conversations changed in January. More pointed, more comparative. She started saying things like, Tanner doesn't think about money the way you do, or Brooks just books the flight. He doesn't spend a week budgeting it. I'd absorb those comments quietly. I work in financial planning. Thinking about money is part of how I move through the world. It's not a personality flaw. It's not being afraid of life. But I started to hear it that way. Her framing had a way of doing that, quietly repositioning things until they looked like limitations instead of choices. One night in February, she came home from drinks with that group and sat on the edge of the couch, still wearing her coat. I was on the other end, laptop open, working through some numbers for a client presentation the next morning. She watched me for a moment. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like you're living too carefully?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" "Like you're so focused on protecting the future that you're not actually in the present." I closed the laptop. "Are we talking about me or something else?" She looked away. "Just something I've been thinking about." We didn't talk about it again that night, but it stayed in the room for weeks. March came. We had what I'd call a series of non-fights, disagreements that never fully escalated but never fully resolved either. She wanted to take a last-minute trip to Mexico with Tanner's group. I had work obligations. She went anyway. I didn't make it a crisis. When she came back, she was quieter than she'd left. Not in the comfortable way. In the way where you can tell someone is sitting with a decision they haven't spoken out loud yet. I didn't push. Maybe I should have. Or maybe I already sensed that pushing would only accelerate something that was already in motion. The Saturday it finally happened was gray. One of those mid-April New York mornings where the light can't decide whether it wants to show up. We'd had a quiet breakfast. No real tension. Just the mild distance that had become normal by then. She was standing at the kitchen counter with her second cup of coffee when she set it down and turned to face me. "I need to say something." I put down my fork. "Okay. I've been doing a lot of thinking." Her voice was measured. Rehearsed, almost. Like she'd run through this a few times before. About us. About everything. She exhaled. About where I am, what I want, who I want to be. I waited. "I think we want different things," she said. "And I think I've known that for a while, but kept hoping something would change." I looked at her steadily. "What things?" She folded her arms. "You're too safe, Maverick." And there it was. "You're too predictable. Too focused on stability." She met my eyes. For someone like me. The room was completely quiet. I felt that line land, not with a crash, but with a strange kind of weight. Like a sentence that had been true for longer than either of us admitted. I took a slow breath. And then I said something she clearly didn't expect. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay. If that's how you feel," I said, "I think you should trust that." I stood up from the table. "I'm not going to argue with how you feel about me." She stared at me. I think she'd expected something else. A protest. A rebuttal. Some version of "please don't do this." But the truth was, and I'm not proud of how calm I was about it, I'd already been grieving this for months. Not the end exactly, but the version of us that felt effortless. The version where she looked at my steadiness as a good thing. That had already been gone for a while. What was left wasn't worth saving through argument. I moved out over 3 days. I didn't rush. I didn't make it dramatic. I called Preston, my oldest friend, the kind of guy who doesn't ask a lot of questions but shows up with a truck and a six-pack. And we moved my things to a place in Astoria I'd found on short notice. Smaller than where I'd been. 1 bedroom, decent light, close to the subway. It was enough. Harper and I didn't have a big final conversation. We texted a few times about logistics. Who would keep what? The deposits. The practical things. And then, around the end of April, the text stopped. For a few weeks, I checked my phone more than I should have. Not hoping she'd call. Not exactly. More like waiting for the feeling to settle. Waiting to see what was left once the noise of the relationship cleared. What was left turned out to be pretty quiet. And quiet, I realized, had been missing from my life for a long time. May and June blurred together. I ran more than I had in years. Picked up a project I'd let sit for months, a financial modeling tool I'd been building on the side, something I genuinely believed in. I had dinners with Preston and his girlfriend Dakota, who is one of those people who has the rare ability to make a table feel like an actual place instead of just 4 people sitting near food. I slept better. I cooked real meals. I read books that weren't about anything useful. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. There were nights in May when the apartment felt too still, when the absence of another person had a texture to it. But it was a clean kind of pain. The kind that feels honest. Not the dull, circling ache of a relationship slowly unraveling while you pretend you don't notice. I heard things through mutual connections, the way you always do in New York when your circles overlap. Harper was living her life, going to the events, traveling with the group. Someone, I don't remember who, mentioned she and Tanner had gotten close. I didn't ask for details. I told myself it wasn't my business, and I meant it. What I couldn't have known then was exactly what kind of life she'd landed in. I ran into Brooks in August at a coffee place on Bedford Avenue. We'd always gotten along fine. He was easy company, the kind of person who could talk to anyone without it feeling like effort. We stood outside for about 20 minutes. At some point her name came up, the way it does when two people both know the same person and neither one is quite sure how to navigate the edges of that. He mentioned she'd had a rough couple of months. I nodded like I already knew. I didn't push. He said something about a situation with Tanner, vague, uncomfortable, and then moved on quickly. I noticed, but didn't file it anywhere important. Not yet. September. I got a message from a number I didn't have saved. Hey, it's Harper. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I stared at it for longer than I needed to. The message was short. Too short to tell me anything. I thought about not responding. I thought about responding and asking what she needed. I thought about a dozen versions of a reply. What I sent back was simple. Sure. What's going on? She called 20 minutes later. She sounded different. I noticed it immediately. Harper had always had this quality to her voice, a forward momentum, like she was always slightly ahead of the conversation, pulling it toward where she wanted to go. The voice on the phone didn't have that. It was quieter, careful in a way I'd never heard from her before. I just needed to hear a familiar voice, she said. I didn't say anything. Things have been not great, she continued. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Are you really? And she said it almost lightly, like she was testing the weight of the question. Yeah, I am. Silence. Then she started talking. I won't reconstruct the entire call exactly, but I'll tell you what I understood by the end of it. The exciting life she'd chased had a price she hadn't read the fine print on. Tanner wasn't what he'd seemed from the outside. He was charming the way certain people are charming, fully and completely, right up until the moment they need something from you. The relationship, and I gathered it had become a relationship, though she never said it directly, had moved fast. Fast in the way that feels like passion and only later looks like instability. There'd been a blow-up at one of his parties. Public. Loud. The kind of thing that ends up in group chats you're not part of, retold by people who weren't there. She'd left that night feeling like the ground had opened up under her. Money was also a factor. She'd put her name on things she probably shouldn't have. Not criminal, nothing like that, but financially sloppy in ways that had consequences. Borrowed money to fund a trip. Helped cover a venue for an event that fell apart. Little decisions made in the spirit of living fully that had accumulated into a number she wasn't comfortable saying out loud. I thought you were holding me back, she said near the end of the call. Her voice was flat, not accusatory, more like someone reading back something they'd written and no longer believed. I know, I said. I was wrong about that. I didn't say I know again. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything that would make the moment about me being right. I said, what do you need right now? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I think I just needed to say that to someone who would actually hear it. We talked for about 40 minutes. I asked about the financial situation and gave her some straightforward guidance. Not as her former partner. Not with any warmth of that old dynamic attached. Just practically. Here's what you do first. Here's what matters most to resolve. Here's how you think about the next 6 months without letting the stress of it spiral everything else. She listened. She thanked me. And just before she hung up, she said, "You're the most solid person I know." I sat with that for a second. Solid. The same quality she'd once framed as a flaw. Take care of yourself, I said. You too. And that was it. I want to be honest about what I felt after that call, because I think the easy version of this story is that I felt vindicated. And maybe there was a thin layer of that. Human nature being what it is. But mostly I just felt tired. And clear. There's a version of this story where I saw Harper's call as proof that I'd been right all along. That stability wins. That the exciting life is just chaos wearing better clothes. But I don't think it's that simple. She hadn't been wrong about everything. I was cautious. I did sometimes mistake planning for living. There were moments in our relationship when I held back not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear of losing ground I'd worked hard to build. Fear of disruption. Fear of the kind of abandon that doesn't ask for permission first. She'd seen something real. She'd just drawn the wrong conclusion from it. The answer wasn't to find someone with no guardrails. The answer was to figure out what she actually needed underneath all that restlessness. I don't know if she's figured that out yet. I hope she does. By October, I was in a different place than I'd been in years. The side project had started generating interest. A small financial tech firm reached out about a collaboration. Nothing massive, but the kind of opportunity that makes you understand your own work differently. I'd started spending Friday evenings at a bar in Astoria with a loose group of people I'd met through Preston. Good people. Low noise. There was a woman named Qley, Preston's coworker's friend, or something equally indirect, who had this effortless way of making conversation feel like it was going somewhere real. We weren't anything yet, but there was something there worth paying attention to. I paid attention to it. I think about Harper sometimes. Not the way I used to. Not the jagged way of someone still carrying something unresolved. More like the way you think about a chapter that taught you things you didn't know you were learning at the time. She taught me that holding your ground doesn't mean you're afraid of living. It means you know which things are worth protecting. She taught me that some people can't see stability as a feature, and that's not your fault, and it's not entirely theirs. It's just a mismatch that no amount of effort resolves. She taught me that when someone tells you who they are, you have to believe the full sentence, not just the flattering parts. And I taught myself something in those months after. That the quieter version of your life, the one without constant drama, without the rotating cast of crises, without the low-level exhaustion of never knowing what comes next, that version isn't the consolation prize. That version is the point. Brooks texted me in November. Just a short message. Heard you're doing well. Good man. I replied with something simple. We grabbed coffee once a week for a while after that. He never brought up Harper again. I never asked. There was something respectful in that, I thought. Some situations don't need to be narrated to death. You just carry what matters and leave the rest where it landed. The last time I thought about her call was a Tuesday in December. I was at my kitchen table, the new place, the one with the decent light, running through projections for the project, coffee going cold next to me. It was the kind of Tuesday that has no drama in it. Nothing urgent, nothing that needs managing, just work and quiet, and the particular satisfaction of knowing where you're going and why. And I remember thinking, almost as a passing thought, not even a full one, that this was exactly what she'd called too safe. This Tuesday, this coffee, this room. And I thought, yeah, I'll take it. She said I was too predictable. She wasn't entirely wrong. She just never understood what it feels like to stand on ground that doesn't move.